Hilma's ghost. Welcome to the Witch Wave.
Hi, we're so happy to be here,
Hello,
Pam.
Pam and everyone. So great to be here.
I'm so thrilled that you're here. I've been such an admirer of your work separately and collaboratively. Just so people know who is whom or whom is who, I don't know. I would love for you to introduce yourselves individually. Let's start with you, Sharmistha.
I'm Sharmistha Ray,
Mhm.
and I'm one half of Hilma's ghost.
Yes.
And I'm Dannielle Tegeder, the other half of Hilma's Ghost.
Perfect. So I have been a fan of your work for a long time. We are both, yes, being videoed, but a lot of our audience is auditorily based. And so one of our challenges is going to describe to our listeners what your work looks like. So by way of introduction, how do you describe the project of Hilma's Ghost and what kind of imagery and colors does that conjure? Let's start with you, Sharmistha.
Yeah, no, thanks for the question. So we are a spiritualist feminist collective, and we'll talk about the history a little bit later. But essentially, we started because we saw the gaps that exist in art history, kind of starting with Hilma af Klint. She's not the only one, but there was that incredible show at the Guggenheim.
Yes.
And we were like, where has this work been?
Mm-hmm.
And so that started us on a journey during the pandemic where we were like, and what else?
Mm-hmm.
So really, we're looking at those gaps where women, spiritualists who are artists, have been overlooked. We ourselves are educators, diviners, and also working with geometric abstraction.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is our language. And geometric abstraction has not only in history within Western art, but also ancient cultures have used abstract symbols in many different ways. And so it was really for us both working with geometric abstraction, thinking about what are our alliances with history, ancient, the modern past, but also the contemporary. We have different aesthetics, but together, the work is really geometric, abstract, reaching for the spiritual. We think of sacred geometries, spiritual abstraction. It's really kind of thinking about how women, our ancestors have used these languages. And the colors tend to be really bold and saturated.
Yes. Dannielle, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, and just to tag on to that. So we make painting collaboratively, which is fairly unusual. So,
Yes.
I mean, the joke between us is Sharmistha uses really hot colors and I come in with grays. And so that's like the quintessential Hilma's
It's
Ghost.
like
So
Irish
yes.
rainfall
Yeah, so-
on my tropical sun.
so there's a fusion when we're stepping in to make work all the time. And because painting, I think, and we're both individual painters for a long time, since it has such a kind of isolative, almost egotistical, like you're alone painting, like Pollock, I think stepping into making a painting with someone is pretty unusual, and fusing all those, we come from different traditions, so fusing that together. And then, of course, fusing it with the spiritual and
Yes.
everything around us as well.
So let's talk about your namesake, Hilma af Klint. Sharmistha, you already referenced the blockbuster Guggenheim show. I think that was in 2018 into 2019, if I'm remembering correctly.
Paintings for the Future.
Yes, which I don't know if the record still holds, but at the time it was the most popular show in the Guggenheim's history.
It
Still is. Yeah.
Mhm. And a lot of our listeners and people viewing now know Hilma af Klint's name. But for those who don't, just in case, let's give them a little primer on who she was. Dannielle, why don't you start?
So Hilma af Klint was, an artist that was in obscurity for quite a long time, and an abstract artist. And I like to say, like, we tell a lot of stories about her, that she was off on her own and she was making work, but really she was collaborating with a number of people essentially, and also really trying to show her work as well.
Yeah.
And the Guggenheim show, it's really just incredible to have. We had a discussion with Tracy Bashkoff as the curator, and I find this really interesting. She was like, we knew artists would love this, but we didn't know how the public would take it.
Yeah.
And of course, the public was like ecstatic, and it became the
Yes.
most attended show.
Exactly.
history.
And speaking about her working collaboratively, my understanding is she would do this kind of like seance art group. I believe they call themselves the Five. I don't know what
Yes.
the Swedish name was. Um, and essentially, it was a group of women who would get together and they would channel and they had spirit guides. And, we're essentially taking artistic dictation from the other world, correct? And so, what was it about that, Sharmistha, that you really connected with so much so that you wanted to co-name your collective Hilma's Ghost?
Wow. Well, Hilma of Klint, I mean, she's like, worthy of goddess worship now. But
Yes, Saint Hilma.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. Sorry, could you repeat the question? Because I'm just
Of
kind of like
course.
got
I was
lost in my
just
thought for a
wondering
second.
why she was the person you decided to name your collective after and what it was about spirituality and art that so resonated with you both.
Yeah, so, we're both trained as painters, and, painters are always after this kind of single ego consciousness in a
Yeah.
way, and that's the way we're trained. It's like your vision, your ideas, your experience,
Your
and
signature at the bottom of the painting.
your signature at the bottom of a painting. And, Hilma of Klint was working collectively. Little known is that, these women, there were different numbers of women and but there were always women.
Mhm.
They were always channeling. And that was, of course, a time where, this people were really interested in the spirit world in terms of the invisible and the unseen. And that also has some ties to science as well, and what was happening in science and the development of the x-rays and
Mhm.
photography and all those kind of things.
We're
And
talking
so
19th century, just to
end of the
place
19th
people. Yeah.
century, early 20th century. And
Mhm.
so there was this tremendous interest in the unseen world. And, they were really investigating this as well. So it wasn't just these kind of group of witches in a room doing this. They were really also reading science. They were
Yeah.
reading kind of what was going on currently. And they were really examining this as well in a really serious way. And it was actually years before they heard the first voices.
I
It was
didn't
years. It
realize
didn't just
that.
happen. They were actually, they would meet regularly and they would channel, but it was years before they heard the first voices, which is
Mhm.
so interesting,
That
right?
is so
It was this
interesting.
discipline, and they didn't just give up, or they didn't just all hear voices automatically. They were really working on this for a very long time. And the numbers of women changed. I think that's the other interesting thing that is unfolding from this, that, in the Hilma af Klint exhibition, Paintings for the Future, that first room had those huge paintings, the 10 largest.
Mhm.
And those are just, they take you out of this world, and she had
Yes.
done those.
And sorry to interrupt,
Yeah.
just so people know, and I imagine a lot of you are familiar, those listening and watching, but Hilma's work, I mean, yes, it's abstract. There is some figurative symbolism in
Yes,
some of her works.
absolutely.
Sometimes you will see swans and hearts and things you can recognize, but other times it's almost like amoebic and it's very prismatic, lots of colors. It seems like she's expressing herself through her own coding system or
They're
symbol system.
alchemical,
Yes,
actually.
beautifully
Mhm.
said.
Yeah,
Yes,
they're alchemical.
exactly.
And what's being understood now is that she didn't make those paintings alone.
Mhm.
The 10 largest were actually done through seances, and there were other women in the group that were also making those works with her. So they were collaborative.
Right.
And I think
Am I
that's
remembering Anna Castle?
Castle.
Anna Castle,
Yes,
who is incredible.
as one of her
One of her
collaborators.
collaborators, potentially at some point her lover. There
Mhm.
was also kind of these other hidden stories of gender and sexuality
Yeah,
in the group, and so on and
sure.
so forth. So, um, wow, I've talked a lot. Maybe I
No,
need to let you
Great.
perfect.
talk
Great.
And
about
Yeah,
so
Hilma's
just
so
ghost.
I'm
Why-
wondering, Dannielle,
yeah.
so why did her name or the name Hilma's
yeah.
Ghost then become the moniker under which the two of you wanted
Well,
to
I mean, I think
collaborate?
I speak of thousands and thousands of artists when I say that that show was so influential, but it really was a paradigm shift. It really, and we say that our work, yes, we love Hilma, but we also love Isol and we also love Agnes.
Yes.
It
And
was
Leonora
really,
and
and
Remedios and
Leonora,
All of
Leonora
them.
and
We love all of
yeah.
them.
and we,
Yep.
it was really about that space was finally opened
Mhm.
through that exhibition. Like all of a sudden, after that, there was space to make work about magic, about spirituality, about the fusion of abstraction in these things. And you saw all these artists who were mined out of history,
Yeah.
and And again, just very influential. So I always say, like, we're not really, we are Hilma disciples, but the whole collective is really not about Hilma. The whole is really about the opening of this space
Yes.
that to include, the artists around us who are making work, but historically, so many artists who made work.
Hmm. And the piece of gender seems so relevant here because, as many know, the field of abstract art, so many people thought it was like Kandinsky and Mondrian and, all these dudes who were the alleged founders. And then we find out that people like Georgiana Houghton and Hilma af Klint and so on were doing this kind of work even earlier. And it like both shouldn't be a competition, but also it kind of feels good, right? To be like, it was women who were, doing this sooner and just didn't get the credit for it the way Kandinsky, et cetera, did. So it seems like this great act of reclamation too.
It's also we've done an incredible disservice to people like Mondrian, who spent a very long time exploring spirituality in
Mm-hmm.
his work as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really removed out of so many. I think those layers were removed out of artists that were even given their due.
Yep. Yep.
So in
That's
a lot of
so
ways.
right. I mean, I remember studying art history. It was my minor, one of my minors at NYU, and not getting any of the like spiritual or magical language being described to me about work that I knew was spiritual and magical just like intuitively. And it was so frustrating. Like, I was there from 99 to 2003. And it was still like this very materialist point of view.
Formalist kind
Yes.
of
Absolutely.
Exactly.
perspective.
Exactly.
And I want to add to what Danielle said. Like, I think that we're doing all artists a disservice
Yeah.
to kind of take out this entire parallel history, which is really kind of has to be integrated with the story of art,
Mhm.
like many artists have spiritual lives,
Ugh.
right?
I would argue most, if not all. Like, to me, art is a spiritual
Absolutely.
practice.
It's an act of
Absolutely.
transformation.
Exactly. It is casting a spell of a sort, whether or not that's the artist's intention. And I do think there's a way that you can put magical intention, specifically into one's work, but so many of us have been transformed by art and it feeds our spirits, right? There's something
Absolutely.
alchemical that's happening when we make art and when we view art and so on, listen to music, all of those things,
Absolutely.
all of
Yeah.
those things.
Yeah, and I would say one of the reasons that this kind of spiritual root was taken out of modern art is because essentially it was also the catalyst was a woman, Helena Blavatsky, who
Mm-hmm.
has since maybe been discredited for some of her ideas, but you can't discredit that entire history and the way that it had such a massive impact on culture,
Yes.
on society, on artists. I mean, Hilma af Klint,
Mm-hmm.
was a theosophist.
Mhm.
Vasily Kandinsky was a theosophist. I mean, they were all theosophists.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. And theosophy, again, for those listening, we've talked about this many times on the show, but it is worth you delving into. It's this, spiritual body. I don't even know if we should call it a religion, but it was
It's kind of an alternate religion in a way. Yeah,
I would call it
absolutely.
maybe also like a spiritual philosophy.
Yeah.
And yes, one of
It's
the
better.
co-founders of it is this woman, Helena Blavatsky. And listen, she had some problematic views, as pretty much everyone in the past did, right? Nonetheless, so influential on so much of culture. So thank you for conjuring her name into our magic circle today. Now let's shift and talk about your work and how you work together. Um, well, you did a beautiful job of describing some of the work in terms of it is quite abstract. There's a lot of geometry. I see a lot of what I would call sigils.
Color magic too.
Exactly. So it seems like you're coming from this very informed route that's also research based, I would imagine, as opposed to solely intuitive. Am I correct about that?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
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 For sure.
And so I guess the obvious question here is how did you two start to work together? How did you meet? And what made you decide to start collaborating? Because that's a really intimate thing. My goodness. Dannielle, do you want to start with your origin story?
It really goes back to the pandemic, which so many things I feel like go back to now. I
Yeah.
mean, so many things changed. And, Sharmistha and I were friends for a long time, and they had written on my work for a piece. And We were friends, and when the pandemic happened, we decided to do some pandemic, like we just decided to do salons essentially and
Yeah.
invite a witch in or a shaman and do workshops. And we're both professors, so it was kind of a natural.
Hmm.
I mean, the joke again is we thought we'd do 2 Zooms and be done with it, and here we are, like almost 5 years later,
Wow.
with bodies of work and a public art piece and tarot and Hilma's Ghost shifts all the time. We have our school, we have installations, we have so many different
Yeah.
things.
And I'm going to ask you specifically about some of those that you brought up. How much, let me rephrase that. How comfortable do you feel sharing how you work collaboratively? Or is it sort of like your secret formula? Like, I'm trying to envision, are you literally in a room
It's a secret
together?
formula, even from us.
It's a mystery to us as
yeah.
well.
I mean, let me say that, like, I say that as a joke, but it is actually true that
Yeah.
both of us have long-standing careers as artists. But if you
Yes.
could have told me that I could have stepped into making bodies of work over 5 years, and in a weird way, like the work is so seamless, and
Mhm.
it's a mystery. Again, I mean, we are doing magic through it. So we're doing rituals, we're doing magic, we're doing sigils, we're doing color magic, we're pulling tarot.
Mhm.
But still, stepping into making a painting, I would have said to you there would have been a lot more conflicts in that
Yeah.
process. And there's really not. It's kind of incredible.
Nosy
Yeah.
question then, Sharmistha. Are you physically in the same space when you're working on work? Are you trading off? Are you working on a canvas at the same time? Like, do you mind speaking about the literal
Yeah,
physicality of being
no,
together? Like, can one of you leave and say, okay, you do this corner or you do all the blue? Or I mean, I don't know what the language would be if you don't
yeah,
mind sharing.
yeah. People ask us this a lot, and
Mhm.
I think we came up with a good phrase, which is we work like jazz musicians.
Yeah.
It really is this call and response. And it's more useful for us to see our work, even our paintings, which is seen as like this kind of finished, thing. For us, it's a conversation. And at some point, like the conversation has come to an end in that piece, but it continues somewhere else.
Mm.
So we never really, of course, a painting has to be finished, for example, drawings have to be finished in a certain way because they're going out into the world. But there's an open endedness to it that, is very different from when you're an artist in your studio and you're trying to resolve things because
Right.
it's not just you in there.
Right.
There's two people and then a third thing happens. And we
Yes.
always say that there's a third consciousness present
Yeah.
from the fusion of those two, of us two kind of working, because we just don't know where things are going to end up.
Yes, yes. And of course, that brings into their conversation the idea of the third mind that Brian Geisen and William S. Burroughs popularized. They got it from, I want to say, Napoleon Hill originally first coined that phrase. And so it's this idea, again, alchemy, we're going to keep talking about it, that like 1 + 1 = this third other thing that you seem to be kind of communing with this other thing or creating this other thing. Is that how it feels? Like you're,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it also, I will say, when there is a conflict in a color choice or a background, we're turning it over to magic. So we pull tarot cards and we actually trust that process. So
Yeah.
the tarot or divination or sigils or rituals is in a way directs the work.
Ah,
And yeah, which I don't know, it's been a revelation for us as well, because again, when you're in your own studio, like you're really directing the show, through your ego in some
yeah.
ways. And
Yeah.
so turning it over to that has been fascinating. And yeah, and there is a looseness. I mean, again, the joke is like when I have gray down trimmed of its color, or
Yeah.
like vice versa.
Yeah.
And there's a
This
looseness that
balancing.
you also, it's a spiritual, like there's a spiritual meaning. You have to keep letting go completely
Mhm.
through the whole process.
And I imagine you have to trust each other quite a bit.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like, we've made so much work together that's in there,
Yeah.
somehow.
Yeah. How beautiful. So let's talk about tarot. You have a tarot deck that you worked on together. You gifted me this deck, and I'll hold it up to the camera.
Yay.
Hopefully, folks can see.
First edition. Now we're in the third edition, I
Well,
think.
there we go. Uh-oh. Don't worry. It's not going to show up on eBay. But it's called Abstract Futures Tarot. And maybe you could speak to this. I don't know if you want to. I don't think it's shuffled. I was like so
Oh.
careful to preserve it
really?
as an art piece that
Oh,
I
there you
haven't
go.
used it yet. So maybe you want to
Wow.
like pop
Activate
its
it.
cherry with
Is it
me.
open?
Yeah.
Okay.
I do
Yeah.
want to say one thing
Yes,
about it
please
before
do.
Dannielle
And then
does her
yes,
thing.
please show the camera some images and
And
yeah.
the third edition has a
Box.
booklet that we wrote.
It
Oh,
has
beautiful.
sparkles.
So
Ugh,
this is
love a
actually
shimmer. Love a gilded edge. Who doesn't?
Yeah, it's not shuffled.
Yeah.
So I do want to say one
Break
thing
it in
before
and
we
then, yeah.
we break into the tarot
Yeah.
and about the tarot, because this is a good segue that we went from doing online workshops during the pandemic, and we were actually co-learners in that space. We're like, we want to know about this, and we want to try this, and we want to do that.
Yeah.
So we were co-learning in this space, and from the beginning, we had like over 200 people joining us, and we were not even marketing these workshops.
Yeah.
Which showed us that there was this huge interest.
Absolutely. The appetite is just enormous. And I think it's
Enormous.
growing. Even,
Yeah,
It's
Absolutely.
growing. And our first project together as artists in terms of making work together was the Abstract Futures Tarot.
Oh, right on.
Yeah, and we were kind of tricked into
That's
it a
a
little
hell
bit.
of a big thing. Like you're biting off a lot. And you did the full like 78.
78 drawings,
Whoa.
which was then additioned into this deck.
Incredible.
Yeah, and we were actually invited to do it. I mean, now it makes complete sense that we would have physically worked together.
Yes.
But we were invited to do a project at the Armory Show 2021. There was a year gap because of the pandemic. So there was this huge interest, in this new edition. And, it was a miracle to us that we got a solo booth because nobody knew who we were.
Whoa.
We were just doing these online projects, and suddenly we're like, now we have to make work together.
Wow.
But there's magic at work. Like,
yeah.
there's definitely magic at work. And we were invited, and that kind of led to, and since then we've been making work together.
So this is the first, wow.
This is the
that's really
foundation
incredible.
became the foundation of everything, really. And I love this idea of making a tarot or a tarot card as a magical rite of passage in
Yes.
some way, and like fusing that meaning, but then fusing it between another person and
Yeah.
beyond is even more powerful.
That's so beautiful. And of course, so many of the tarot decks that we know and love, many of them were at least the visuals were designed by women. We're talking about like Pamela Coleman Smith and Lady Frida Harris. And, the
Absolutely.
list goes on and on and on. Okay, so I don't need you to do a whole reading.
I
Intuitively,
won't
what
break
should
out
we
the
do?
Celtic cross.
What should we do a reading for? Maybe for
That's a good
whoever's
question.
listening, a message
Yeah,
that might
I mean,
be
I
valuable
think
for
something
them?
that's coming up now a lot, and we do a lot with tarot, obviously, is, I mean, what do we need to know now about moving forward? And I think that we're in a time of environmental collapse, political collapse, a
Mhm.
lot of fear, a lot of uncertainty.
Yes.
And I would say maybe what do we need to know?
Yes.
Like now.
Ooh.
I mean, that's just
Do
a quick,
it.
we'll do a quick.
A quickie.
So this is beautiful. I'm going to shuffle your deck.
Okay,
So if
please
for me,
do.
this is really like charging the deck
Love it.
and opening that. Why don't you shuffle it a little bit?
And maybe I'll
Charge
shuffle
it
it
between
too
the-
to get
Yeah,
my little
shuffle it
paws
as
on there
well.
too.
Definitely.
Since
energies
we're
into it.
yeah. Ooh, I like your shuffling method.
this is like-
Sharmistha, that's
Shuffle?
sexy.
I know, this is
like different
I'll do
kind
the
of
whole
shuffle
thing.
here.
Wow.
Fascinating. I'm going to send you to Vegas.
So for those who are only listening, Sharmistha's shuffling in this way I've never seen
Really?
before.
Me too.
Yeah,
Well,
it
that
was
was the
like
way I
very
was
like taking
shu-
the top and the bottom cards swiftly in one hand. See, and I do the old school shuffle of like
Oh, yeah, that's a
yeah,
great
but then I'm never good at putting it back together like that. So there we go.
Fascinating.
And I'm gonna charge it.
Yes, wonderful.
I'm gonna cut
All of us.
it. Okay, we've all put our magical mitts on the deck. Danielle, would you like
Wonderful.
to do the
Sure.
honors?
So what I'm going to do is, instead of this very rigid laying things out analytically, I'm going to do something a little unusual. I'm going to do what I like to call more of an unconscious kind of feminist spread, meaning that I'm making a little bit of a pile here in front of me, and then we kind of go fishing in it. So I'm going to what do we need to know now? And I'm going to wait till I have an intuitive ping. And I'm going through this pile with my fingers for those of you listening. Well, we have the Page of Wands.
Oh yes.
Wonderful. Very fiery, but fun.
Yeah.
Fiery, but fun. The
And
Page
young.
of Wands. Here we go through. The Empress. Oh,
Oh,
oh
come
my. You
We need
can't
some
make this up.
feminine energy
Yes.
You
in there.
can't make this up.
So good.
And let's do one more. Great.
Mhm.
Okay, this one's great. Wonderful. Wow. And we have the Hierophant. Incredible. So we have two major
Whoa.
arcana. So it's a pretty and then sitting in the center here, we have the beautiful Empress, which again,
Yes.
we cannot make this up.
And Dannielle, can you hold the cards
Yeah,
up to the
so we
camera as
have
well?
the beautiful Empress.
Mhm.
And, again, like creativity, number 3, the heart of, feminism, Mother Earth connection,
Mhm.
really beautiful. I think what we need to know now is really connection, actually. What we
Mhm.
need to know now is art making, connecting to the earth, connecting to one another, connecting in every way, and really thinking of that, rejuvenation. And the Hierophant, always interesting. I always, always a troubling card for some people, that Hierophant in a lot of ways. And a number 5, so troubling in itself. And I think that's really dealing with like, how do we deal with this structure that is happening around us that is, in power now in many ways? How do we challenge that? How do we think through what is important in these traditions, like the Constitution or everything like that? And how do we
Mhm.
really challenge those and think so beautiful paired with the Empress,
Mm.
who has a lot of movement, and the Hierophant, I would say, a lot of structure.
Mhm.
And the Page of Wands makes his or her appearance
Mhm.
as a very fiery, but moving forward in a very almost fun way.
Yeah.
And I would say that, in your resistance, in your art making, in your connections, to also have an element of, I would say, like deep play in that,
Yes.
and deep fire and that fiery kind of transformation as you move forward. But also, yes, taking it seriously, but also having a sense of play in all of
Yes.
it and moving forward. So beautiful reading.
So
Thank you for everyone.
fantastic.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. I'm really so lit up by this. What perfect cards. And that really resonates with a
The
lot
Empress
of
in
the
the
things.
middle. I mean,
I
again,
know a lot of the
I
things
love
we've
it.
been talking about and thinking about on the podcast and in all of our respective work too. Beautiful. So, okay, so you worked on this deck together. How large were the drawings? Did they have to shrink to become cards, or were they card
Yes.
size? Okay.
They were about 11 by 17
Oh, wow.
inches.
Okay.
So they were, for those of you who can't see me doing this.
Yes.
And they were set out on shelves,
Mhm.
and they went from the major arcana to the pentacles to the swords to the cups and wands. And for us, with the color choices that we made, it was like a spectrum
Mm.
of color that surrounded you, and they were on shelves to kind of mimic the tarot cards.
Mhm.
And there were 78 of them. And as I said, we work like jazz musicians. To go back to your earlier question, there's like sometimes where there's a soloist, and someone takes a lead somewhere, and then
Yeah.
someone else does in response. And it really kind of has its own rhythm and play.
Mhm.
And once you're in it, you're just in it,
Yes,
And so
yes.
there's no measuring that happens there. It's just a conversation.
Ah, I love that
Yeah.
so
And
much.
they're on our website as
Yeah.
well. People can see them. But even thinking about the the idea of color magic and, black as the major arcana and just this combination of all of these things coming together, or the wands are red. So they're very color magic based in a way,
Mhm,
but
mhm.
intuitively. And they are also completely abstract. So also pretty unusual in the realm of tarot. Even looking at the Thoth, there's still a lot of figuration.
Mhm.
And that was very purposeful. We really wanted to make a deck that transcended strict gender roles. Like, I love the Rider-Waite. I still read with the Rider-Waite.
Mhm.
There's a lot of issues
Oh,
with it.
yes.
And it's really obviously not inclusive. So, we wanted to kind of get under all that information with color and with composition.
So
And
beautiful.
symbolism, yeah.
Yeah, I love the deck so much. So, where did that lead you both in your practice together? What was the next kind of, I don't know, breakthrough moment or project for you?
Wow, we've done so much.
Yeah, I
I
know.
mean, it's when we look back at the work we've done in the last 5 years,
So
it's
prolific. It's incredible.
it's actually like there's
We have
several
help
people
from the
making this
spiritual
work,
world.
Yeah.
and it's yeah, we have a lot of help from the spiritual world,
Yes, yes, yes.
definitely. I think each body of work presents us with a new set of challenges
Mhm.
in terms of thinking through some of these questions, thinking about these different forms of, say, sigils that have already been in existence, like how do we use them and interpret them? And what are we communicating through them? There's always like fundamental things that we're grappling with, and we're also trying to go back to what we've already done,
Mhm.
but always thinking about it in a new way. So I feel like each project has presented us with a set of questions that we felt excited about.
Yeah.
I would say a complete loop in a way has been to the mural now
Mhm.
Yes.
with the deck. It feels
Yes.
like a full circle, definitely.
We're gonna get to the mural, I promise,
I
because I
mean,
have
I know, am
so
I
much
like
to
preempting
discuss.
things?
No,
Yeah.
no, no. The mural is so fantastic. But leading up to it, I mean, I'll just name a couple things off my list. You did something called Enchantments. Am I getting that name
Yeah.
correct? Bottled devotionals of divine feminine spirits, which felt very witchy to me. It was like a
It
box
was
of
pretty
little
witchy.
bottles and
Thanks to the
vials.
Aldrich Museum. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so the enchantments box was a box essentially inspired by witch jars and
Hmm.
spell jars, and it was at the Aldrich Museum, which is in Connecticut, and of course was the hotbed of witches in so many ways. And what we did is we created a jar spell for a number of women artists, deceased women artists, like Anna Mendieta is in
Hmm.
it, but also different saints. Kali is in it, Saint Bridget is in it. And it was during the pandemic that you could actually check this out from the museum.
Oh,
And
wow.
we wrote spells for each of these. So you would take them and you would hold them and they would be charged, and you would take them into your own home. You would check it out from the museum. It was wildly popular. We were actually
And there's only
really
one of these
there's
boxes?
3
Three, but
boxes.
they had
Okay.
two that were being
They
checked
had
out.
2 being checked
Wow.
out, and yeah, we didn't really know how it would go. We thought maybe it was more of a maybe a conservative place, and it was wildly popular. People would check it out.
Yeah.
And then we
Yeah.
actually did a whole as an extension of our school, we did a whole jar spell symposium day where
Mhm.
we
Workshop,
made
yeah.
workshop. We did a workshop where everyone made a jar spell
How
as an
fabulous.
extension of it.
How fabulous. Sharmistha, can you talk about you have some pieces that are round. They remind me of like Pennsylvania Dutch kind of hex wheels or
Mhm.
mandalas. And I noticed a lot of them are named things like abundance or peace. And I was curious, did you both intend for these to be active spells? Are they manifestations or are they more like reflections or emanations the way Annie Besant and C.W. Ledbetter's thought forms were, or something in the middle? How
Yeah,
how do
so
they
much to say in
work? I
response
guess
to
I'm
that.
trying to ask these wheels that you created.
Yeah, before I talk about the wheels, just because it relates to the wheels and your
Please,
question
please.
is we actually did a series of sigils called Sigils and Thought Forms. So
Mhm.
Perfect.
completely relating to Annie Besant and C.W. Ledbetter's book Thought Forms, which was so influential as well. It was the first time that the unseen was being, I guess,
Represented
represented in
ish.
abstraction. Like, there were abstract forms to represent the unseen
Mm-hmm.
through this method of clairvoyance, which was radical, right?
Yes, yes.
And so influential to abstract artists working with abstraction.
And just so people following know what we're talking about, Thought Forms is a book, I want to say it came out in the early 20th century.
Yes, in the first
Um,
decade of the yes,
yes,
yeah.
thank you. And it was two collaborators who were kind of disciples or collaborators with
They were
Helena
theosophists.
Blavatsky. Yep, Theosophists. It's a beautiful book. It was actually just re-released by Sacred Bones
Such a
Records.
beautiful book,
Gorgeous
Yeah,
green
beautiful
edition.
book.
cloth-bound book, beautiful.
Stunning. And a lot of people trace that as perhaps informing Kandinsky and a lot of other abstract artists. Certainly was in dialogue with a lot of the early artists. So that was a kind of inspiration point for you both as well, it sounds like.
Yeah, and we were using Austin Spare's method of the sigil in terms
Mhm.
of deconstructing language. And each of those sigil drawings actually had meanings attached to them. So you had ritual, transcendence, abundance, and we were using those words, deconstructing them, and embedding them in these sigils. And we were also thinking about clairvoyant use, a way of clairvoyantly channeling color.
Mm.
So we're bringing those two ideas together in
Yes.
those. And the sigil is essentially a symbol,
Mhm.
right? And so the body of work, our next body of work was these wheels. And we were actually invited by Moravian, and the show is actually happening later this year,
Oh,
Moravian
wonderful.
University, which is in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, which
Oh,
is right in Dutch
yes.
country,
Mhm.
Pennsylvania, Dutch country. And so that started our research on these Pennsylvania Dutch barn stars, if you will. Do you want to say more about that?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
first of all, they're up in Mexico City. So if
Oh,
anyone is in Mexico
fabulous.
City, they're at RGR Gallery. We have a solo exhibition up now. And yes, they were absolutely inspired by the tradition of hex signs in Pennsylvania. Although it's really interesting, as I was in Asheville last weekend and I was looking at images of Black Mountain, and there were all sorts of hex signs
Yeah.
painted. So it's all through, it goes much further even
Sure.
than I thought. What struck us so much about these is that they look so much like contemporary abstraction. It's just
Mhm.
incredible. But of
Yes.
course, they were fusing color magic, protection magic, all sorts of things into these, and they were hiding them. So, I mean, there's a lot of controversy about the hex signs, right? That
Mhm.
maybe they were not magical, but they were actually hiding them in a number of places. So we know that they were in a lot.
Interesting.
So for us, it's really a fusion of contemporary abstraction and color magic, protection magic, fertility magic. And like, yes, going just to answer your question in short, like, yes, they're active spells. So
Oh,
when you
that's what I was hoping you'd
quiet
say.
them, or they're brought into your home, or you're with them in some way, they're completely charged. And yeah, they're active kind of color
How
spells,
fabulous.
manipulative.
And they're also charged through the looking and the feeling and everything that happens when you're looking at a work of art. So that
Yeah.
intentionality is very present.
Gorgeous. It's so funny because we keep like, and I'm doing it too. We keep talking about contemporary art or modern art. But of course, I mean, human beings have been representing the divine, the otherworldly, the sacred through non-figurative abstraction. I
Hmm.
mean, I'm thinking, of course, about like Islamic art and just tantra
Tantra,
Yeah.
paintings.
both are part of
Exactly.
my history. So yes, I'm
Tell
interested in both of
yeah,
them.
yeah, tell me more about that. I'd love to hear more
Well, I
about
grew up
that.
in Kuwait in the Middle East.
Mhm.
So, I mean, there was no representation of the human form,
Yes.
I mean, I think in scripture as well that the divine is beyond kind of the human, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
so um, it really is represented through abstraction. And you have the gorgeous mosque architecture and the
Yes.
mosaic tiles. I mean, which for me also feels kind of a full circle with doing, which we will talk about.
Yes,
The
yes.
Grand Central Project.
It's
So there's
next, I promise. I
yeah.
feel like
No, no, no,
we're
no, no.
really edging the
Yeah, no, I'm not
listeners
trying to
right
preempt anything.
now.
And of course, Tantra. I mean, I'm
Yes.
from India as well. And one of the centers of Tantra and Tantric magic is Bengal, where
Yes.
I'm from. It's a more figurative tradition there. The more abstract tradition comes from Rajasthan in the north, but
Mhm.
completely obsessed with those images
Oh my
because they
gosh.
really are vehicular in terms of channeling the divine. These images were not an end in themselves, these abstract images, and they were so simple, but they evoke so much because they were channels to the divine. And so that was a representation in a way of divine channeling. And they're just, I mean, most of them have been destroyed because they were never meant to be collected or,
Yeah.
kept.
They
They
were
were
active or
active. And when their
interactive.
use, when they had met their use, they were kind of discarded or not really kept. So,
Yes.
and it reminds me of shaker gift drawings as well. I mean, in that sense,
Mhm.
right?
So I just want to shout out the book Tantra Song, which
Oh,
was
yeah.
so
Well, everyone, I
groundbreaking.
mean, so
Everyone we
amazing. Get all
know and
these
love.
books.
I know,
Yes.
Frank Andre
Platforms,
Jamais. Oh my
Yes.
God.
And
But
I,
yeah,
yeah.
please, Danielle.
I mean, we know it's ridiculous to think about abstraction when, this first abstraction, when, abstraction was going on for thousands of years. And
Yes.
I also, again, want to go back to there needs to be a complete reframing of abstraction in general, because to look at people, even like the abstract expressionists that I was kind of bred off of, and not infuse these ideas of spirituality, is ridiculous
Yeah,
now.
of
Or
course.
Mondrian or so many of these
Yes.
other artists
Yes.
in a lot of ways.
Are you ready to talk about the
We're
mural?
ready.
Okay. So, oh my gosh. You both designed, I suppose that's the right word,
Yep.
channeled, conjured a fucking epic work of art that was just unveiled. I mean, by the time this comes out, a couple weeks ago, at Grand Central Station. I know. I almost don't even know what to ask you. Just like, tell me everything about it. I've seen the images online. I can't wait to
Well-
go. It's so stunning and splendid. Congratulations, first of all.
Thank
What a
you.
huge
Thank you so
accomplishment.
much.
Thank you.
And yeah, I mean, well, first of all, we just want to say, first of all, thank you to the MTA
Yes.
for sponsoring also something that connects into spirituality and the tarot. And we also want to shout out to Stephen Mioto, who is an incredible person and the mosaic fabricator, who is a real magician in glass.
Yes.
And just incredibly beautiful. And
The
you know-
MTA never gets love by people who live in New York City. Can I
Yeah.
just say, I'm a big fan. And I'm going to say one other thing. People are always shitting on the subway. Well, literally. But also, just don't do it near the mural. But figuratively, people are always talking shit about the MTA and the subway. It is still one of the few public transportation systems where it is the same amount of money to go anywhere in the system. They don't charge you more for living further away like most other public transportation
It's true.
systems. It is totally democratic in that way. It is still affordable. It still runs 24 hours, a little slower than it used to before the pandemic. I'm a big fan. There you go, on record.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
one
it's
of
the
the
biggest portal of like spiritual, like also just thinking about spirituality
Yeah.
and portals and
Chthonic energies, you're going
And
underground.
No, and the
we
people
love,
who use it
like,
from all
the-
walks of life,
Yes.
the diversity, like it's like, I don't know, like a microcosm of the
and
world.
you know, it's for us, it's
right?
at Grand Central, right? So it's like those are
Yes.
some of the deepest portals, the escalators that go up into our piece. So for us, that became like this spiritual meditation. Now it's if you do want to find it, like it's next to the very non-spiritual Foot Locker. If you're on like 42nd and
But you
3rd
know
Avenue.
what? Foot Locker, do they still have kind of like the winged foot as their
Yes,
logo?
yes, yeah, I
Mercury.
think they
So
do.
there you
That's-
go. And
you can
Grand Central's
see
a
it.
temple of Mercury.
Yeah.
He overlooks, Hermes,
Oh,
Mercury
that's so
overlooks Grand Central.
And
when
you can
first
see it
walk
even from
in.
the street. So we're so incredibly lucky. And again, there's spiritual forces from beyond. Like it's completely looks we're so happy with it.
I mean,
Looks
we
so
were ecstatic
beautiful.
when we,
Yeah.
got it. I have to say, we were just
Okay,
ecstatic.
I have a lot of
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah.
There's a lot to unpack here. But first of all, it's by the 7 train.
It is the new entrance to the 7 train. And you can
Fabulous.
come out of Grand Central into it, but if you can also enter right on 42nd and 3rd, right
Mhm.
again, next door to the Foot Locker.
It's between the
you'll
Foot
see.
Locker and a Starbucks, also not very spiritual. But if you,
Although there's a Melusine, used to be the logo
that's
for
true.
Starbucks
Yeah.
as well.
Oh, that's so
Listen, I'm
interesting.
trying. Magic and sigils everywhere if you're looking.
This is true.
There
yeah.
you go. There
And
you
so
go.
with the
Walking on the street.
entrances, and what we love is that, I mean, it's not completely free because there's a fairway involved, but it's $2.90, much cheaper than going to any museum. And that's what's really exciting for artists always, is that it is the public that engage with this.
Yes.
There are no other filters. And, it's so magical just to have that in public space, and people who don't expect it, or like these unexpected encounters with it. It's just so special to have
And
that.
I feel like and we'll talk about what it looks like in a moment, but I feel like the fact that it's at Grand Central, which is such a palace. I mean, I think about the constellation ceiling. It's a gorgeous Beaux-Arts building,
Mhm.
preserved still, unlike so much of New York, which is constantly, dying and being reborn. It's a magical, magical building in general.
Sure.
And the fact that there's so many commuters, you're getting this like cross-pollination of people. And I imagine a lot of people probably have their head down, they're rushing. For them to be confronted with this like blast of color and magic and beauty on their daily commute, or for tourists to come in and see it. Like, what a gift. I cannot wait to see it. So please tell everybody, what does it look like? Describe it for us visually.
So it's based this mural is called Abstract Futures.
Mm.
It is actually based on the major arcana of our tarot deck.
Stop it.
It's the major archetypes, the major arcana, and it really tells the story of, we're going to call it the heroine's journey.
Yes.
The heroine's journey
Mhm.
from the beginning, the fool. And we told the story completely through abstraction, symbolism, and color magic. So once you apply these stories, you'll start to see how we've done that. So the
Mhm.
first portal is the fool, is passionate, hot, pinks. There's this vertical energy in terms of the composition.
And if we're looking at it, this is like starting the leftmost
left.
area.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, if you come through the fairway, it's actually
Okay.
going to be right across from you. And if you come up the escalators, is going to be to your left.
Okay.
So
I'm
it's from
swooning.
left
I'm
to
swooning.
right.
Keep going.
And so, and that is the story not of just everyone who comes to New York. It's a story of immigrants, a story of everybody. Like, when you take those big risks,
Mhm.
right? You need that passion, that energy, like pushing you towards
Yes,
that.
leap of faith
The leap
time.
of faith. And that is the fool. That's a
Mhm.
fool card. And then the second largest wall is the Wheel of Fortune, is based on the Wheel of Fortune, and that is really the grounding card. You'll see a lot of earth colors, earth tones, grounding colors, a little bit more. Now the Fool has
Mhm.
come down to earth a little bit. This is the material realm. There's disappointments.
You're waitressing.
Yeah.
Instead of making your artwork.
Mhm.
Right, exactly.
Mhm.
There's all these challenges and ups and downs, which is the story of everyone in New York. And then you go from the Wheel of Fortune into the celestial realm. You have the moon, which is the shape of a crescent in our design. You have the star immediately above it. And so this is the shadow self in a way. But the
Mm.
shadow self is also extraordinarily beautiful. You just,
Mm.
there's a light from the stars and the moon illuminating this. And that's the spiritual self, right? Like you're coming through these challenges and you're coming into the space which you're integrating the physical and the spiritual together.
Mhm.
And again, the colors are dark of night, but there's sparkly elements to it as well. And then you go and the last wall is actually the largest wall. And half of that is the symbol of the sun. But we also wanted to integrate the world into that,
Mm.
and so the light is kind of returning. The colors are kind of this fusion of light returning, during daylight. And the last symbol, which is kind of this has this horizontal movement to it, is of our wands.
Oh,
Fire, action, energy,
there we go.
regeneration, going back to the beginning,
Mhm.
and really telling the story of the cycle
Ah,
and the cycle of life. And so, that's
splendid. Splendid. And how, Dannielle, do you imagine people interacting with this piece? I mean, I know you can't control that,
Yeah. Well,
but what do you envision in terms of what you're hoping for?
there's a few. Yeah. So
Yeah.
there's a few things. I mean, first of all, it's been so exciting for me to just watch people go through the space.
Yes.
Which is again in a way magically activating, and also just a little bit about the physicality that we have these two curved walls that, to be honest, we were not very happy about in the beginning.
Yeah.
And we were like, oh god, we make work
incredibly
about
difficult to
straight
design. Yeah.
lines.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they really envelop you,
Mm.
and there's different walls, so it really does show this kind of process of going through, which is beautiful, going from the escalator or out or going in through the entrance in that way. And how do we view? Well, I hope people, we've actually asked people as you walk through, we've actually asked, and I'm asking for everyone's help on this to keep charging this for us,
Yeah.
to think of an artist, a mentor, a feminist person, someone that really inspires you, and I want you to whisper it into the wall as you. So we're asking, a lot of people have done this already, so thank you. And just as you go through, just whisper and keep charging this wall for us,
Ah,
With the
in a lot of
feminist
ways.
spirits.
So I
beautiful. I
hope you're
love
transformed
that.
as you walk through, not only with this beautiful glass, which is transcendent in itself, but just this energy.
Oh, that is so stunning. I love that so much. Now, when you pitched this to the MTA, were you pretty blatant and like out of the broom closet in terms of the magic,
It's like
or
the
did you
basis of a
sneak
lot of
this?
conversations.
Well, because I
Well,
know the
yeah.
institutions, and as much as hooray, Hilma off Klint and all these other occult and magical shows that have happened, there still is the art speak
Yeah.
and the language and it's a lot of
Public space.
veiled.
There's a lot of beliefs in
Yeah.
publics. Like
Yeah.
people are
So I
coming.
just wondered, how much of this was
No.
covert and how much
Well,
of it was
this was the
overt, if you
basis
don't
of
mind my
a lot of
asking.
conversations that we had, and it was really challenging because it was like it's hard to talk about something like this and then not talk about it.
Mhm.
And also, we're publicly witches, like
Mhm.
where it's pretty public. You don't have
Yeah.
to scratch,
Yeah.
like, you just
Google.
have to
Hello.
Google.
And they invited us.
They
Yeah.
invited us,
So there was like, they know our work.
we actually through
Good.
actually it was a process. We kind of gave in, like halfway through. I was like, we just have to embrace this, and if we don't get it, we don't get it.
Yeah.
I was
There's
like,
a
we
moment
just
of
be
surrender.
them.
Yeah.
Yes.
But because our work is abstract, I feel like in a way, again, it becomes very inclusive in a way that kind of figuration or something wouldn't.
Yeah.
And so we went with it. We were pretty blatant, to be
Yeah.
honest.
We talked about the tarot, definitely, and the archetypes of the tarot and the journey.
Yes.
And shout out to the MTA Arts and Design as well, I will say.
Yeah.
At the time of writing the press release, they actually wanted more information about the tarot and the journey. They didn't take any of that out. They, so supportive, facilitated this entire process, wanted us to have our work in public space, supported the language around it as well. So we have them to thank as well for allowing this to happen
Yeah.
in public space. Because I will also say that we had a really crazy story of a tarot deck, one of our tarot decks that was delivered to the wrong location.
Mm-hmm.
And this was in, sorry, Pennsylvania, we love you, but it was in, and it was burned.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was burned. Won't give the denomination of the community who did this, but it was burned, And so we're well aware of the different...
there's definitely can be a backlash.
Yeah.
I mean,
Absolutely. And stigma.
we know
and
this.
Misunderstanding.
You're right.
We know this, especially
and
now.
Yeah.
But I think also these stories are ageless stories that go into myths, and you look at the Bible and it's inherently connected to organized religion in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Like there's levels of Judaism or Christianity. So
Sure.
it's,
and what was
people don't like to talk about that much,
Yeah.
but there is lots of all of those systems embedded.
Yes.
No, and the story we wanted to tell is one of inclusivity. And we often say, like, don't be afraid of the witches, be afraid of the people who burned them at the stake.
Exactly.
Right?
Thank
Like,
you.
witches were mostly healers,
Mm.
right? Malevolent
Mm.
magic is a very small % of actual magic. But that has kind of been blown up in the public imagination through media and so, and histories and so forth. And those stories are really about gender inequity more than anything else, right?
100%.
These women were not harmful to society in any way. And so, but they were not dependent, right, on patriarchal systems, many of them. That, they lived alone, or they lived with women, or they lived with their cats, or whatever else, right?
Or a lot of women and cats.
Right. And they were in
Tarot
direct
decks.
line of inheritance. Like, love Sylvia Federici's book, Caliban and the Witch,
Yes,
right?
the best.
It's always been tied to money systems and capitalism,
That's right.
This kind of exclusion. And what we're trying to do, we wanted to use this to really tell a story that we can all connect into, right? It's not an exclusive story. It's an inclusive one. And I think that essentially is what we wanted to create as this gift to New York, a city that we just deeply love,
So gorgeous. Again, just like the hugest congratulations, the hugest
you.
thank you both. I mean, I cannot wait to visit it. And just the idea that it is supercharging this already really like magical palace. And I mean, the other thing that's coming to mind is the fact that Mercury is the god of commerce. And, this idea of the wheel being his symbol in a lot of different systems too. And I love that you are taking that magic and I mean, I suppose we could say that Mercury energy is sort of gender nonconforming or non-binary, but I still think of him as kind of a dude. And the fact that you're feminizing this temple of Mercury, which is what I think of Grand Central
Oh, that's so
as, is
interesting.
like really, I don't know. it excites me anyway.
You said you had a story about Grand Central.
Well, my story is that, without talking too much about it, because I think my listeners are sick of hearing me mention it, but I have a new book coming out called Magic Maker: The Enchanted
Gonna
Path
be
to
amazing.
Creativity, and it's all about art and magic, and creativity and magic being essentially the same thing. And Mercury is its guiding sort of spirit. So I've been doing a lot of Mercury work, and I am going to do a working at Grand Central just privately, just for me and
Mm,
the book, to just like give it a little extra love and, an offering to
great.
Mercury. But it didn't feel like the right time, and I didn't know what I was waiting for. And now I'm like, oh, so
It's
clearly
arrived.
I'm
Well, that's
gonna
a
like,
huge honor for us.
yeah,
Like,
so
Yeah,
obviously I'm gonna
absolutely.
go and give my offering to Mercury under the main entranceway, but now I'm gonna incorporate your mural as part of my
Oh,
ritual
I'm so
for the
honored.
book and to help it find whomever it's meant to find. So,
we
yes.
love that. It's like
Yes.
a collaboration.
Absolutely.
Continuous collaboration. Yeah.
I know we have just a few moments left. I wanted to give you, Dannielle, an opportunity to also bring into the chat any ancestral magic or influences from your family, because we talked a little bit about Sharmistas. Are there any? You
Yeah.
mentioned Irish
Mhm.
rain. Are we talking
Yeah.
Celtic
So,
magic
so
on
my
your
I do some
side?
Celtic magic.
Yeah.
My family is originally from Ireland,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm an Irish citizen. I go to Ireland quite a bit, and again, I work with Saint Bridget a lot, in different ways. But also, I mean, my history of I've been doing magic and tarot since I'm 14,
Mm-hmm.
and I grew up in the middle of nowhere in upstate New York, and I tell the story of like driving to Connecticut because somehow Connecticut was still the place that had occult shops.
Is Connecticut edgy
It's
in
kind of
your personal
incredible.
mythology?
You know,
Wow, that's shocking and
they
delightful.
have more occult shops
Yeah,
than
yeah.
almost anywhere. So, and also for me, it was like music and heavy metal and transcendence through that.
Mm-hmm.
And things like that. So
Yeah.
I've always been involved with the tarot. I still read with I have a deck from when I was 14. I still have that deck
Ah,
in a lot of ways.
love it.
Yeah.
And how have the two of you sort of evolved your own understanding of spirituality and magic since starting to work together? Whether that's through your art practice or just the way you engage with capital S spirit. How has working together shifted your own
Oh,
understanding of
that's such
such
a huge
things? I
question. Oh my
know. I like to
God.
end on a high.
Let me try to I always think of like the altar that we have in our studio has like Kali and Saint Bridget next to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's something in that collaborating in this way also it then connects you into collaborating with the world in a lot of ways. It
Mm-hmm.
opens that up out of exactly who you are in a
Mm-hmm.
sense, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's become wider and deeper, and you
Ah,
see the connections and all of that.
so gorgeous. What about you?
Yeah, no, such a big question. Yeah, I think of spirituality as expanding consciousness.
Yes.
It really expands you. And when you're expanding, you see these connections that may have been hidden, right? To ideas, to other people, to community. I mean, for us, it's not just about being, independent artists or two artists working together. We realize there's this entire, people are being charged by this,
Yes.
right? People are being charged by that. And, the more charging work that we're doing, the more charged we become. So it really is a symbiotic, it's not us and what we put out into the world. There is this growing thing,
Mm-hmm.
and it's about being immersed in that. I mean, I almost feel, and I feel like this as an artist as well. The more I know, the less I know.
Yes, yes,
I
yes.
feel that way
Yeah.
about the space of spirituality. It's like the ocean,
Mm.
It's like it's endless and you're immersed in it. And, you look back for the shore and it's gone, and you
Yep.
just keep going deeper into it.
Yeah. Well, I feel supercharged from this conversation. I cannot believe we're at the end of it. It felt like it was 2.5 seconds long, which is always a good sign. Before
Thank you
we
for having us.
go, of course, people are going to want to know how they can learn more about both of you individually and as Hilma's ghost. So if you want to shout out any of your Instagram and websites and all the good
I'll
stuff.
go through those.
Yeah.
So we're pretty active on Instagram. That's usually the best ways to find us.
Mhm.
We're both also personally connected there. So you can get on our mailing list. You can go right to our website, which I'm happy to say has been updated. It's like a minor miracle in itself.
Yes.
And so all of those ways you can DM us. And the other thing about Hilma's Ghost is it's never been really about us as individuals. It's been about this whole community that has joined us in this and who has also been so influenced by Hilma and so many of these other artists,
Yeah.
that have opened, and it's led so many people to magic. So
Yes.
so say hello. You can find us in all those places.
So it's our
Yes.
name, Hilma's Ghost,
Mhm.
HILMASGH.
OST.
Yeah.
I'm like, did I spell that
I
right?
know, I
Yeah. So
know.
that's on Instagram.
Yes,
And,
perfect.
find us there.
We,
Yeah.
we are also gathering, we're also building our mailing list because Instagram seems so unstable sometimes. So if you
Yes.
want to be on our mailing list, just, send us your
Great.
email.
And you mentioned a school that you're heading as well. Is that something
So
people
we have the
can-
Swan School.
Yes.
And we do virtual classes. We do in-person classes. This summer we're teaching at the incredible place Mildred's Lane.
Yay.
Which is border of upstate and Pennsylvania, and we'll be teaching magic of resistance for a weekend. But we also are teaching in-person classes, so reach out
We're
to
like
us.
a traveling band now. So
Yeah,
I
if you
love
want to
it.
be on that mailing list, you're interested in, and we also
Coming
do
to a city near you,
individual
yes.
Right.
mentoring sometimes.
Nomadic art
Yeah.
witches.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Love. Well, this has been just such a treat. Dannielle, Sharmistha,
Thank
Hilma's
you.
Ghost. Thank
We
you
love
so
the Witch
much.
Wave. I just
We
want to
listen
say
to it in
that
our studio all the
we
time.
spent so much of our beginning time, of Hilma's Ghost listening to the Witch Wave. So we're such a dream for us to be here, really.
I'm so honored, and just the love and admiration is so mutual. Thank you both for being here.
Thank
Thank
you. Thanks
you.
so much, Pam.